Hi, Misfits. This is Kevin, a.k.a. the Nun.
And this is Kate. Just Kate.
But Kate, you have a skeleton costume.
I do. This is our Halloween episode.
Yay!
Well, Halloween's tomorrow, but
Right.
this is our Halloween
episode.
Whoop, whoop.
Mm.
Welcome to Horrorwood.
Oh, we forgot to say that. Welcome to Horrorwood. Is that scary?
Terrifying. Also, it's hard for me to look at you right now because, I know it's you.
Yeah.
But your costume and makeup is so on point and so amazing that it's just, kind of freaking me out. I'm just over here boring in the same thing I wear every Halloween, which is a skeleton onesie.
I like Kate's skeleton onesie.
Thank you. It's not because I'm not original. It's just because I can't afford to get costumes and makeup.
No. See, budget.
Yeah.
Amazon, cheap makeup, fun.com.
Fun.com.
Also known as HalloweenCostumes.com.
Oh, okay.
$29, baby.
Oh, I love it.
Right?
Love it.
And I'm only going to wear it twice. I decided not to dress up tomorrow because I don't want to. I have to have some serious conversations tomorrow for work.
I see. Okay.
And the last time that happened, I dressed up as a demon and I had to go to a committee meeting and sit there and talk
and
about
be responsible.
my job.
Oh God.
And everyone was just what are you doing here?
Oh my God. You look amazing.
Thank
we'll
you.
post pictures for sure.
Excellent.
And tomorrow on actual Halloween day, we have a little bonus video coming out that we're going to record with Kevin in his costume.
Yes.
And me in my onesie.
Yes.
It's going to be on Patreon, but the free portion of Patreon. So everyone can watch it and we'll, shoot links to it through Instagram or whatever.
Instagram, Facebook.
Yeah.
at Horrorwood Podcast.
There you go.
Starting out this.
Yes. Shout it all out.
Foshes.
Oh yeah. Foshes. Genuine. What's up, homie? And if you don't know what we're talking about,
go listen to Britney Spears' memoir.
Or Google Michelle Williams, Justin Timberlake.
Right.
It's amazing. And speaking of shout outs, we have a new Patreon.
New Patreon.
Heather Shaw, this is your shout out.
Thanks for joining, Heather. I think Heather left a comment on the most recent post about.
She did with the horror movies.
Yeah,
because she has
she made a spreadsheet
of 250 horror movies.
That's insane.
Heather.
I love it though. Heather, I need to see that spreadsheet.
Yes, and I need to know if there were any on Kevin's recommendation list
that were on your list.
Well, that weren't
on your list.
I'm curious to know. Heather, we hope you're having a banger of a Halloween
Thanks for joining,
week.
Heather. Kate and I went to a haunted house.
Okay, and it was my favorite haunted house that I've ever been to.
I love that.
And I loved when I told you that and you were like, I've had better.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to be a downer. I hate when people do that to me. And I was like, meh. I thought it was so well done.
I thought it was awesome.
It was very cool. It was longer than I anticipated.
Yeah.
And it was out in the middle of nowhere.
Both parts, before and after. We waited in line.
2 hours.
Yes, 2 hours in line. But you know what? It was fun.
It was fun. I mean, it was good atmosphere, good people, good music. Oh my God,
the music was
that
amazing.
Shazam playlist.
Oh, Kevin was Shazamming everything.
I was dancing around my apartment last
line.
night, cleaning. It was good.
It was really fun. And as someone who, as a child, was terrified of haunted houses and would never go, and even into adulthood, I've always still been kind of scared.
Yeah.
Honestly, though, after I was buried alive at that one, I feel like nothing can scare me. And this one was just cool.
Good.
Half of it's in the woods.
Yeah.
We should mention it's Hell's Gate Haunted House.
Hell's Gate Haunted House in Lockport, Illinois.
Yes. And you have, a day left to go to it, so get on that.
And they shuttle you out to it in a school bus.
Very creepily.
It's very through the woods. It's really creepy. I mean, I really the lead up to it is really, really cool.
I loved it.
like
and they
that.
serve alcohol. So while you're waiting for 2 hours.
Concessions, corn dogs. Everyone was really nice that worked there
It was
until you
great.
got in the haunted house.
It was the best haunted house. You guys,
Good.
there's a slide.
There's a slide.
And it really elevated things for me, I just have to say. So Hell's Gate Haunted House, go do it.
Go do it.
It was banging.
I love it.
What do you have for us today, Kevin?
Kate. So this is kind of a multitude of different things,
Ooh.
all culminating together in a story that comes together in a movie, which was in 1992, and then there's a sequel that came out in 2021.
Yes.
So a lot of the movie, which you watched,
Yes, I've watched both of them.
which is amazing, is very much a commentary on social issues in Chicago specifically.
And you know what? I will say this. Well, they know by the title what this is. We're talking
Candyman.
about Candyman.
I was like grinding up to it.
Oh, sorry.
I know you're good.
I was like, well, it's going to be in the title.
It's going to be in the title, so you'll know.
But when I first saw the original,
Yeah.
I was like 11. And it was at a Halloween party with a bunch of friends. And I didn't get it. I didn't understand
Me neither.
the messages
No.
that were coming across. And we were doing like Ouija boards, and I'm sure people were going into the bathroom and like saying his name 5 times in the mirror.
Oh,
and I was also,
yeah.
that was in my scared era
Yeah.
of like, everything's out to
Everything's
get me.
terrible.
So I didn't get it. And then I watched the new one just recently because I didn't see it when it first came out. And I was like, oh, I did not realize that that's what all of that was
absolutely.
about.
And then when you go back and watch the original,
Yeah.
it really comes out.
you're like, interesting.
Holy
but
shit.
But yeah, I'm excited to hear this background and everything that you have prepped for us
so
today.
this is the story of Ruthie Mae McCoy and the Candyman legend in movies. I probably should have just started with that.
It's all right.
Rather than like, oh, there's this thing. It's a social It's the nun in me.
It's the nun in you. Your costume's amazing.
Oh, right. A lot of this is going to be Ruthie's story.
Okay.
Because it is so much more involved than I originally thought, and it
Ooh.
touches upon everything that the movie talks about with its
Okay.
themes and symbols. Ruthie Mae McCoy lived in the ABLA Homes housing project on Chicago's South Side.
All right.
ALB. Oh no. I put ABLA and then I typed LABA. I'm going to say ABLA Homes
Okay.
was composed of Jane Addams Homes, Robert Brooks Homes, Loomis Courts, and Grace Abbott Homes. It was
So
like a collection.
ABLA, yeah.
Yeah.
Now I get it.
Thank you,
The
Kate.
last names.
All of these homes combined included about 17,000 residents.
Whoa.
It's a ton. McCoy, a 52-year-old black woman, suffered from mental illness and was diagnosed with schizophrenia. She went through her life afraid and was often paranoid. McCoy lived in apartment 1109 on the 11th floor of a 15-story brown Y-shaped tower at the end of a corridor in the Grace Abbott Homes project, located at 1440 West 13th Street.
Okay.
So according to the research that I was doing, it was one of the most dangerous places you could live.
Oh, shit.
The housing projects in Chicago in general at this time in
Sure.
the 80s were a mess. The building didn't seem very welcoming or safe to its residents. The elevators were dark and didn't always work.
Oh, I hate that.
So on any given day, you never knew if the elevator was going to work.
Oh.
The stairwells were not lit. And many residents were suffering from addiction to cocaine and PCP.
Okay.
Gangs and violence were rampant and a daily occurrence. It was not great. So what I do want to start with is I want to give a brief history of Chicago public housing.
Okay.
And this is from the About section of the Chicago Public Housing Authority's website.
Okay, great.
Which is at www.thecha.com, thecha.com.
Okay.
So CHA was created in 1937 to own and operate housing that was built by the federal government under President Franklin Roosevelt's Public Works Administration. The first 3 housing projects built in the late 1930s included Jane Addams, Julius C. Lathrop, and Trumbull Park Homes.
Okay.
They were all part of Roosevelt's New Deal programs to provide affordable housing for low-income families and combat blight. After the 1965 landmark court decision in Gethro versus Chicago Housing Authority, in which a group of residents alleged that CHA engaged in racial discrimination by building public housing solely in areas with high concentrations of poor minorities.
Yeah.
CHA was placed into receivership, which was lifted May 2010.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's recent.
That's crazy. Initially, public housing operated very similarly to private market housing, using income from rent to cover the costs of maintenance, operations, and adequate reserves. Although the cost of the land and construction was borne by the federal government. As the stock of public housing aged across the country, however, the cost to maintain the buildings rose, and along with that, the rent rose as well, right?
Yep.
There we go.
It's an endless cycle.
So by the time a rental subsidy program was passed in the early 1980s, the high concentrations of poverty and neglected infrastructure were way just too severe.
Mm-hmm.
By 1996, the operations of the authority were in such disarray that the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development took control of the agency. They were like, whoa.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This is messed up.
They were like, we need to roll this back.
Exactly. So in 2000, under the leadership of Mayor Richard M. Daley, the city of Chicago agreed to take back control of the CHA.
Okay.
And drafted the plan for transformation, which was an ambitious plan that called for the demolition of notorious high-rise developments, the comprehensive rehabilitation of all the other scattered site, senior, and lower density family properties, and the construction of new mixed income / mixed finance developments.
So when they decided to tear it down, all those people were displaced.
Completely.
Wow.
The guiding principle behind the plan is the comprehensive integration of low-income families into the larger physical, social, and economic fabric of the city. But what are you doing with the people who are already there?
Exactly.
It's fucked up. So I'm going to go back to Ruthie now. That was a brief history of CHA. Kind of this is happening in the throes of the neglect.
Got
what
it.
happens to
Thank you
Ruthie.
for that.
Of course. I think it's important to recognize that history.
Yes.
So Ruthie Mae McCoy was born in Hughes, Arkansas, and was one of 8 children.
Mm-hmm.
She moved with her family to Chicago's South Side at a young age. Black Southern families would often move up this way looking for prosperity, which was known as the Great Migration from the Jim Crow South to escape persecution.
Yes.
Ruthie attended Phillips High School for about a year, but didn't complete.
Okay.
She started showing signs of schizophrenia when she was in her 20s. And she would talk to herself and then all of a sudden just get extremely angry for no apparent reason, which, you know, are indicators of schizophrenia.
What year was this when she started showing signs?
Oh, I don't know the year.
Oh, okay.
I could do the math, but it was just in her 20s. So if she was in her 50s in the late 80s, then I'm guessing this is the late 60s.
Okay. Or late 50s?
Or late 50s.
Okay.
I think.
One of those. I was just trying to get an idea historically of where
No,
we
it's
were.
okay. No, of course. Her mother and subsequently her family were devout Baptists, unfortunately. So no one took her mental illness seriously because they chalked it up to not being one with God.
Oh,
her mom was
goodness.
like, oh, well, she's, you know, her belief has wavered. So that's why this is happening.
Oh,
You know, so she was kind of on her own after that.
that's awful.
Ruthie never married, but she did have boyfriends here and there. And she gave birth to a baby girl, Vernita, when she was 27 years old at Cook County Hospital.
Okay.
The father didn't stay around, though. Vernita didn't spend her whole childhood with her mother because Ruthie was in and out of institutions.
So where did the child go?
Well, Vernita would end up staying with relatives during these periods.
Okay.
Because her relatives were still in Chicago.
Okay.
She had some jobs here and there. Ruthie did in laundromats and as a housekeeper.
Okay.
But because she had untreated mental illness, she wasn't able to hold down those jobs for very long, unfortunately.
Got it. Yeah.
After a flood in her Humboldt Park apartment, Ruthie applied for housing through the CHA, Chicago Housing Authority.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't want to be placed in a high-rise. She put that in her request. Like, I really don't want that.
Okay.
But that's what she got.
What she got.
And she had to take it.
Oh, what were her reasonings for not wanting to be in a high rise?
I couldn't find that.
Oh, okay.
She just didn't want that. I think what I would guess, or speculate is that she knew the high rises was where all the bad shit happened.
Got it.
You know,
that's kind of what I assumed.
It definitely had a reputation, and especially at this time when she's applying to live there.
Sure.
Her daughter Vernita had to serve a jail sentence in 1983 due to some aggravated assault charges. But once she was out, she and her boyfriend and 2 young children moved in with Ruthie at the ABLA.
Okay.
Ruthie didn't get along with Vernita's boyfriend. It was schism, and his name was Louis Butler. And the schism between them caused the family to move out, leaving Ruthie on her own.
Oh, okay.
And this really hit Ruthie, like, really hard.
Yeah, because basically her daughter chose some man over her.
Yeah.
That sucks.
And she missed seeing her grandbabies. And this made her mental illness even worse.
Sure.
Ruthie, in the place that she lived, was known as Miss May at Abbott. And she was known to curse at strangers and wave a stick at menacing teenagers. I get it. But
You're like, same.
Same girl. I don't say that as a joke about mental illness. Even outside of that.
I know.
But in the months prior to her death, she began to turn her life around. She started dressing nicely, acting pleasant, and left the projects on weekday mornings to go to school to get her GED.
Oh, wow. Just on her own volition? She wanted to better herself? Great.
So her teacher, Linda Norman, said that Ruthie was a very good student, alert, bright, and dependable. She started out at the 7th grade level, but in a few months, she was already at the 9th grade level.
Oh, great.
So with the help of Social Security, field reps, and the Mount Sinai Psychiatric Center, Ruthie got supplemental security income, which is federal aid for physically and mentally disabled people. Her income went from $104 per month to $340.
Okay.
The SSI paid her retroactively, and the first check was a big one. She wanted to use the money to get out of public housing.
Sure.
But also got some new clothes, household essentials, and a new winter coat.
That just, especially for Chicago, that breaks my heart that before that she didn't have a good winter coat.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
Ruthie was well liked at the center. She was assertive and opinionated and a mother figure to younger women there.
Okay.
She stood her ground. She made so much progress in such a short amount of time. Her medication adjustments helped, but the center gave her a way to connect with a community of people outside of being afraid to be at home.
Yeah. Oh,
So she talked about how much she hated living in the projects and wanted out so badly. But unfortunately, Ruthie Mae McCoy's life would end at the Grace Abbott Housing Project.
No. Oh, I hate this.
I know. I really didn't like reading this. So there's this really long, amazingly detailed article from the Chicago Reader from the year 1987 by Steve Bogira. And it covers everything. It's so long. And the title read, "They Came Through the Bathroom Mirror. A Murder in the Projects. Ruthie Mae McCoy was the type who talked to herself and crushed strangers on the street."
I don't know what crushed.
I think that's a idiom or something.
Okay. I was like, what are you doing
I typed the wrong word and I don't know what the actual one was. But when she called 911 to report that someone was coming through the medicine cabinet of her Abbott Homes apartment, she might have been hallucinating, but she wasn't.
Ooh, that's terrifying. Because we've seen it in the movie, but to think of that actually happening,
that's what it's based on.
Some rando coming through your medicine cabinet
in the wall from the apartment adjacent to her. This is only the beginning, Kate.
Sure.
At 8:45 p.m. on April 22nd, 1987, Chicago police received a call from McCoy. She said, quote, "I'm a resident at 1440 West 13th Street, and some people next door are totally tearing this down, and then it kind of goes off into garbled.
Okay.
It seemed that the dispatcher couldn't hear her very well, but figured out the gist of what she was saying.
That's when they were tearing down the wall? Is that what she's saying?
Essentially.
Okay.
Someone's breaking into my apartment.
Sure.
Something's happening. Ruthie said, "Yeah, they throwed the cabinet down. I'm in the projects. I'm on the other side. You can reach my bathroom. They want to come through the bathroom.
Oh, my goodness.
The dispatcher asks for her address, which she provides, and notes that the elevator is working today.
That is... You know what? Because this comes up in... Not to like veer off course, but it also came up in the Rebecca Schaefer case.
Yeah.
Because her elevator wasn't working that day. Or it was the bell. Never mind. Sorry. But
It's something that should be there.
Right. Landlords, fix your shit.
Fix your shit. The man on the phone says that he will send the police to her.
Okay.
However, the dispatcher didn't quite understand what McCoy meant about throwing the cabinet down and wanting to come into the bathroom. He didn't understand what that meant.
Sure. I'm not clear that I would either.
Yeah. He assigned a 12th district car to answer a disturbance with a neighbor complaint. That was what he called it, disturbance with a neighbor.
Okay.
And sent a police car to the address she provided. So this is where things get a little dicey with how the call was reported. Police didn't show up for a little while longer, and it's most likely because the call was delegated as a disturbance with a neighbor instead of an active break-in.
I was going to say, it sounds like disturbance is not an emergency, so they're just going to take their sweet-ass time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
17 minutes later, at 9:02 p.m., another 911 call came in concerning Ruthie's apartment. But this call came from a woman who was walking through the hallway and heard gunshots coming from the apartment.
Oh.
2 minutes later, at 9:04 p.m., another call came in from a different neighbor that reported hearing gunshots and screaming from apartment 1109.
Oh, shit.
McCoy's unit. 2 more police cars were dispatched to the scene. 4 policemen arrived at the door to Ruthie's apartment at 9:10 p.m.
And when was her first call placed?
8:45.
So
25 minutes later.
Jeez.
They banged on the door and yelled, announcing that they had arrived, but there was no answer.
Fuck.
They called dispatch and asked them to call Ruthie's phone, but again, no answer. They could hear the phone actually ringing through the door.
Oh, because they didn't break in. They were just standing outside. They didn't break in.
They were just standing outside. Yeah.
Got it.
The police needed to get inside because they thought that maybe she was being held against her will by whomever was trying to break in from the phone call. The officers went to the apartment building's office to get a key, but the key, unfortunately, didn't fit in the lock of Ruthie's door.
Why not? What is going on with these building managers?
There's an answer to that.
Okay.
I'll let you know. The police tried to talk to the neighbors, but no one wanted to talk. No one answered the door at the unit across the hall, and the unit next to Ruthie's was vacant.
Because they're probably scared of the police. That's why no one's answering.
Correct. Yeah. Others didn't answer or wouldn't talk and, say they heard anything. Police tried to contact the office again, but the janitor there said he didn't have any other key to her apartment. At 9:48 p.m., they left Ruthie Mae McCoy's building project.
What? They didn't even try to get in? Like kick the door down?
No, they left. The next day, I know.
Sorry, that was a long exhale,
No.
But the thing is, we talk a lot about inept cops on this podcast, I mean.
Well, and this episode.
And I have read instances where cops do the good thing and they do the right thing.
Of course, it happens.
But shit, a lot of times it doesn't, and people die.
People die. Absolutely. So the next day, Deborah Lastly, who was an 11th floor neighbor of McCoy's, called the police. Ruthie would stop by Deborah's apartment on her way out of the building every morning when she was going to school, and then she would stop back in when she was returning just to say hi and check in. But that day, she didn't stop by. The next day, I mean, after the police are called. So Deborah had seen police at Ruthie's door the night before and was worried about her. 6 policemen and a handful of CHA, Chicago Housing Authority, security guards went to the scene.
After
Deborah called and was like, listen, this is really weird. I saw the police. She always comes by, and she didn't.
Yeah. So
they were like, okay, we'll come out again and, check it out.
Good for that neighbor to be like, get your asses back out here.
Yeah, good for Deborah. The police wanted to break down the door, but the CHA guards told them not to. And one said the tenant could sue the police if they did that.
Oh, for fuck's sake. The tenant is the one calling for help. She called the night before. This is making me angry. I'm angry,
It's
Kevin.
awful. No, I know. I was angry typing this afternoon. Again, they knocked and they hollered for McCoy. And again,
No answer.
nothing. So what did they do?
You tell me. They probably did nothing. They left.
They left.
Are you fucking serious? I was kidding.
No, they left again. The next day, now we're on day 2, neighbor Deborah went to the project office to express her concern. At 1 p.m. that day, 2 days later, mind you, like I just said, a project official got a carpenter who drilled through the lock. There, in the bedroom of the apartment, lay Ruthie Mae McCoy, lying in a pool of blood, hand over her chest, one shoe on and one shoe off. She had been shot 4 times in the chest.
Oh, my God.
A bullet passed through her left shoulder, another went through her left thigh, a third hit the right side of her abdomen, pierced her liver, and went out the left side. The 4th and final bullet went through her upper right arm, entered her chest, and severed her pulmonary vein.
Oh, my goodness.
This was the fatal shot that took Ruthie's life. Medical examiner Dr. Upal Choi said Ruthie probably didn't die right away, as she died of internal bleeding.
That's even more horrific.
However, he did say that she probably would not have survived even if being rushed to the hospital.
Okay.
It doesn't make it better, but like... Yeah.
But also, no telling how long it took her to pass.
Actually die, right?
So she's just lying there.
Ruthie was officially pronounced dead at 4:35 p.m. on Friday, April 24th, 1987. So this is where we get into the actual horror of the racism and segregation in the city of Chicago. Ruthie's death was hardly reported when it happened. The main news sources in the city at the time weren't going to run stories on a project killing, only if there's something extraordinary about it.
What would be considered extraordinary for them?
That's a good question. In the article I previously mentioned, which I'm relying heavily upon, Bogira writes, quote, "Project killings just aren't news ordinarily. CHA residents are blown away, knifed, and kicked to death almost every week. 2 or 3 times a week in warmer weather. McCoy was only one of 3 ABLA residents murdered in the waning days of April. Murders continued and resumed only 2 days after the discovery of McCoy's body. McCoy's death was really only reported in the Black-owned newspaper The Defender. Detectives thought that the killers targeted Ruthie because of the SSI money that she had just come into. They noticed her dressing nicer, having some new things.
Oh, my goodness.
Money that was supposed to better her life ended up being her demise.
Oh.
So why is this story most well known now? Why am I sitting here telling you this one in particular and not the countless others that occurred around the same time in the same area?
I bet you're about to tell us.
Yes. Police originally said it was probably someone Ruthie knew because there hadn't been any evidence of forced entry. So the news died down and life went on.
There wasn't forced entry because they came through the medicine cabinet.
That's right. That's my reveal. But we already know that. But they would have been able to just put it back.
Right, exactly.
So they wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
So, the news died down and life went on. However, the Tribune did run a story on Ruthie Mae McCoy's murder on June 10th, 1987. A second suspect had been arrested and indicted.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, the murder was getting attention due to the fact the detectives had determined that McCoy's killers had entered through her medicine cabinet.
Well, duh. She told them that on the phone.
But they didn't know what that meant because she was like, they're coming through the bathroom. You know what I mean? So they weren't, I don't think, and the
they
dispatcher,
didn't connect it.
They didn't connect it. The dispatcher didn't understand what that meant.
I see. So you said they got a second suspect. They already had a first one?
Yeah, they did.
Okay.
But it's not, it hadn't been reported.
Right.
You know, because it's not, I mean, nothing is happening. Things are happening behind the scenes with detectives, but, you know, nobody's reporting on it.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, sometimes that's a good thing.
Sure.
I understand when detectives do that sometimes, although in this case, it sounds like papers didn't
pick it up because she was a black woman who got killed in the projects, and that's not interesting.
To them, exactly.
To them. Well, yes. So it started to get attention because of the medicine cabinet thing.
I see.
Her attackers had removed the medicine cabinet in the empty apartment adjacent to hers and climbed through the wall into her apartment. But the article was short in the Tribune and buried deep in the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
It still seemed like no one actually cared.
Right.
Bogura writes, the editor's indifference is understandable.
No, it isn't.
I know. In CHA towers, babies have been tossed out of windows and teenagers shoved down elevator chutes.
Oh, my God.
Intruders sometimes bust right through apartment walls to rape and murder tenants.
Oh, my God.
So what's so unusual about a medicine cabinet murder? People in the projects weren't surprised by this, honestly, having been exposed and desensitized to this kind of violence for years. Apparently, intruders had been breaking into apartments through mirrors for almost a year at the Abbott high-rises. This was a thing that had been happening.
So you would think that they would have broken in, just to knowing that the call was about a cabinet. You know, she did mention a cabinet, all of that. If they had a record of this for the past year of people coming in through the walls.
Well, I don't think they did. I don't think they kind of put the pieces together until Ruthie Mae died.
Oh, okay.
So I think it was happening and the tenants knew about it.
Got it.
But the police and the detectives didn't have an idea yet about what was happening, is what it sounds like to me.
Because they were shit.
But that doesn't mean that someone hadn't called and said they came through the wall.
Right.
And they don't care. Like, they don't put anything out there. There was only about 2.5 feet between the pipe chase. The pipe chase is the area between the walls where the plumbing is. So imagine wall, plumbing.
Yeah.
This area between the walls is about 2.5 feet.
Okay.
So like what? This maybe?
Kevin is
I'm trying
moving
to
his hands
this big
in and out. Looks great
I can't
to me.
see them. Where are the hands?
He's got crazy contacts in.
And then the opening of the cabinet was only about 1.5 feet wide.
Wow.
So it was pretty small.
Yeah.
And the cabinets were easily removed with only about 6 nails holding them to the wall.
Jeez.
There were some areas of the building where you could climb up or down into apartments above and below through that pipe chase.
Oh, hate that.
Gang members would often take over 2 or more adjacent apartments and remove the cabinets to escape into different units should police or security ever raid them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the police really failed here, Kate, as we've been saying.
Yeah.
But of course, because Ruthie wasn't white, no one cared. The system failed her, as it often does in these situations. There was no departmental investigation or accountability by the CPD.
Wow. I mean, that doesn't surprise me, but wow.
Yeah. The police department said that the officers had acted accordingly and properly by not breaking the door down.
Ugh.
They get a lot of hoax calls from the projects as well. So, they weren't taking anything very seriously. Criminals in the projects would prey on the mentally ill because they make poor witnesses and unfortunately aren't deemed as very credible.
Ugh.
Isn't that terrible?
The whole thing is terrible.
This whole thing is awful. 2 defendants were charged in the case, with the charges including murder, home invasion, armed robbery, armed violence, and residential burglary. They were Edward Turner, 19, and John Hondras, 25.
Wow.
Detectives believe that the killers knew Mae was home at the time. 3 items were stolen: a phone, a rocking chair, and a television.
A rocking chair?
Mm-hmm.
I assume that they went out the front door and did not crawl back through to get out.
Yeah. They were probably hiding in there when the police were outside. Or they, crawled back through and got out the different way, got out the vacant apartment.
I'm just trying to figure out how you get a fucking rocking chair through a medicine cabinet. They had to have gone
I don't
the
think
front
they did. I think they probably put it, I don't know no one saw what they did or what happened.
Got it.
You know what I mean? So I don't know how they got the stuff out. However, it's a good point you bring up, though, Kate, because the phone had to have been stolen after police left. Because it rang in the apartment when they were calling her. So they might have come back after she was, taken away and taken that stuff. They didn't really take a
good look around.
Right.
Yeah.
My habit's almost falling off.
Oh, no.
Oh.
It's because your headphones are, pulling it, I think.
Joyful, joyful Lord.
Oh, Sister Act. Was it Sister Act 2?
I think so.
Yeah. That was a deep cut.
Thank you, Kate. The chorus just performed that in a show recently. Stuck in my head. The police didn't know if any money was taken, but All that was found in the apartment was just like loose change. The killers were probably still on that floor the night everything was happening.
So freaky.
So regarding the key from the housing office that wouldn't work, Ruthie had changed her locks herself against the CHA regulations, and she did not give the office a spare key. The crime and burglary in the building was so bad that tenants often had to resort to getting things done themselves.
She just wanted to be safer.
She just wanted to be safe, rather than wait weeks for CHA to change their locks. So from Bogira's article, he says, quote, like other CHA projects made up mainly of high-rises, Abbott Homes is characterized mostly by its stagnancy. Bounded by Roosevelt and 15th, Loomis and Ashland, those are streets. It's a little island with no through streets. The project's designers thought that by eliminating the streets, they could give residents more recreational space and a heightened sense of community.
No, that is not why they did it. They did it to segregate them from the rest of the city.
Today, Abbott's open spaces are seldom used, save by residents trying to get home before they get jumped. The lack of through streets has helped isolate the project from the rest of the world. No one can even drive through the development. For Abbott residents, there's no need for streets. Most of them aren't going anywhere. Fear of crime keeps them pinned to their apartments day in and day out.
That is not a way to live.
No.
That is awful.
I mean, that's why Ruthie was just like, I have to get out of here. I have to get out of here. Something harder to understand welds many residents to this place for generations. They have kids and grandkids down the hall.
So it's just like a never-ending cycle.
It's a never-ending cycle that you basically can't break.
Yeah.
Because you don't have the means or resources and no one is willing to assist.
Yeah.
Ruthie was, you know, she found community at Mount Sinai Center. And she started to understand what it was that she needed help with and needed to do to even try to get out of that situation.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like she was like really trying her best to
That's
take
not
some
to
steps
say
forward.
That everyone else wouldn't want to try to do that. But like they don't have there's no resources.
They don't have the means. Yeah.
They don't have the means. They don't have the resources. They don't have people helping them. I think Ruthie was in a situation where she was like, okay, so let me try this avenue to get out of it. ABLA ranked 5th at the time in violent crime in the CHA developments. However, you didn't hear much about this project specifically because of its location on the south side. The project that got the most attention was Cabrini Green. And why? Because it was located not far from the Gold Coast in downtown, near the white people.
Right. And the Gold Coast, let's talk about that for a little bit.
Sure.
For people who are not Chicagoans.
Who aren't Chicagoans. I'm talking about this because we live here and we're like, I know it.
And people are like, what is a Loomis? Fuck is that? Gold Coast is like the fancy place. Yeah. It's like a bunch of rich people. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of white.
Yep.
Still.
Yeah. So the entire story and the violence, hatred, and societally inherited classism of people of color in the city of Chicago and Chicago houses. Wow.
It's okay. Take a breath.
Wow. The entire story and the violence, hatred, and societally inherited classism of people of color in the city of Chicago and Chicago housing projects led to one of the greatest horror movies and horror movie legends of all time. Candyman.
Don't look in that mirror, Kevin.
Sorry.
Okay, people. It's been a little
There's a mirror right beside me. Candyman was released in 1992 and was directed by Bernard Rose and written by Clive Barker and Bernard Rose. The movie follows graduate student Helen Lyle, played by Virginia Madsen, who is researching the Candyman legend while exploring the Chicago housing projects. Candyman was a black artist named Daniel Robitaille, who was lynched in 1890 for having an affair with a white woman whose portrait he was painting at the time.
Is that true? Was there a Daniel that lived that was an artist?
No, that's fictional.
Okay.
And the original story that Clive Barker wrote, I'll talk about this in a little bit more in depth, but the movie story is largely based on the actor that played Candyman's understanding of local history and his experience as a black man. So they actually rewrote the script of the movie, threw it out, rewrote it because of what he brought in.
Oh, and is that Tony Todd?
Tony Todd, yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So, I'll go into it.
Yeah.
The woman's father, the white woman who the Candyman artist was having a thing with, hires a gang to beat him, saw off his hand, and replace it with a hook. He's then covered in honey, and bees sting him to death. Mm-hmm. In death, he is known as Candyman, expertly played by horror icon Tony Todd. The legend goes that if you say Candyman 5 times into a mirror, a man with a hook for a hand appears and kills you. Helen ignores the warning and says it, prompting his appearance. And in his famous and horrific speech, he says, "They will say that I have shed innocent blood. What's blood if not for shedding? With my hook for a hand, I'll split you from your groin to your gullet. I came for you."
Ooh.
After the movie's release, it became sort of an urban legend on its own. Mm-hmm. The saying of Candyman 5 times into the mirror, which is reminiscent of the Bloody Mary.
Yeah, right.
Thing. The movie is linked to the story of Ruthie Mae McCoy, because in the film, Candyman's first victim is Ruthie Jean, a resident of Cabrini Green, murdered by someone that came through her bathroom mirror. Mm-hmm. She calls police for help, but no one came. Her neighbors say that Ruthie Jean is crazy. Candyman largely takes place and was partially filmed at the actual Cabrini Green site, which is on Chicago's near north side, like we said. Mm-hmm. Like most Chicago Housing Authority project housing, the ideas around constructing it were born of good intentions. That's not what happened.
Right.
Racism caused immense neglect, and it became the scene of actual horrors. When the film crew came to shoot at Cabrini Green, they really didn't have to do much to make it convincing.
That's terrifying.
Right? The legend of Candyman comes out of the absence of law enforcement in Chicago public housing and desperation to escape. The residents don't fear Candyman as much as they fear the police.
Yeah.
Candyman was an excuse for the residents to escape to a legend or a fairy tale, if you will. The neglect and horrific violence the residents faced are not caused by one murderous man, but centuries of abuse. Saying the name in the mirror 5 times is a callback to Ruthie Mae. They came through the mirror.
Right.
They got her. It's a symbol of unwanted horrors that abound. Cabrini Green was closed in 2000.
Okay.
And demolition began at that time as well. It was part of an ambitious city plan to transform all Chicago public housing that I talked about earlier in the episode. Mm-hmm. Another racial prejudice the movie brings up is interracial relationships.
Yeah.
That's a big theme in the movie. The character of Helen Lyle is meant to, in a way, be a reincarnation. Why did I say it like that?
You're having some issues.
I'm sorry, Kate.
I don't think you can blame that on the contacts. You don't have to apologize to be messing with you. But you look great.
Thank you. Another racial prejudice the movie brings up is interracial relationships. The character of Helen Lyle is meant to, in a way, be a reincarnation of Candyman's white lover. Mm-hmm. The risk of having an interracial relationship in the history of the United States is staggering and very real. So in the late 19th century, when Candyman is murdered, white mobs in real U.S. history would take out their anger through lynchings, particularly of black men.
Right.
The number of killings began to rise dramatically toward the end of the 19th century. Violence was so popular that mobs would put together lynching bees, which is akin to like a quilting bee or a spelling bee.
Okay.
But murder.
Right.
Candyman's lynching in the film was a reality for many, especially any black man having a relation or even suspected of like having a relationship, looking at doing something to a white woman.
Just to go back a little, and maybe I'm just trying to read something into something that isn't. Are the bees in the movie supposed to symbolize lynching bees?
That's what I originally thought. I don't know, though.
Okay.
I don't know. I think that can be left open to interpretation. Okay. I'd say yes, but I'm going to go into a little bit more history about the story and maybe what it's based on.
I know that they covered him in honey and all of that, so okay.
Right. So the whole... Oh, this is my next paragraph. Kate, perfect.
Hey.
I love it. Kate knows what's up. The whole Candyman story was written by British horror writer Clive Barker from a story called The Forbidden. In the story, Candyman haunted a public housing tower in Liverpool, where Barker is from.
Okay.
So this is really interesting because this is my kind of connection to Chicago public housing, because when I first moved to Chicago, I worked for, I think I might have talked about this already, but when I worked for a company called American Theater Company,
Right.
who the artistic director was PJ Paparelli.
Mm-hmm.
And he had been working for years on a verbatim play about the Chicago public housing situation. And he had relationships with several people in the city on the South Side who had either worked or lived or had seen all the horrors of being down there, but also showed the good side, and there was like people banding together and having community amongst all this horrible stuff. So he kind of showed the myriad of the public housing system. Mm-hmm. And the play got put on called The Projects. And Angie White, who was in Sunset Baby at Timeline, was in it as well. Yeah. And I got to know her through working on, I had to do workshops and stuff for that. Public housing is a big thing, and I think also a big issue over in the UK.
Okay.
In England and Scotland. Mm-hmm. But it's called like council housing, council estates.
Oh, okay.
And I don't want to speak too much to it because I did live there, but I didn't really have any experience with that. But he was over in Scotland working with a theater company over there on like a version of the projects that he had done in Chicago. And so it was kind of like migrating to a different culture to kind of learn about, what are the similarities, what are the differences. Yeah. And that's when he was over there, he got hit by a car and passed away.
I was just going to ask if I knew he was in Scotland when it happened.
He was in Scotland.
I did not realize like that's why he was there.
Yeah, it's really sad. I really liked him a lot. But that's my connection to this whole thing, because I was like, when he was like finishing writing the play so that it could be produced, I was working with him on like putting together workshops for it. Anywho, back to Clive Barker's The Forbidden Story, which Candyman comes from. So Barker's Candyman was a tall white man with blonde hair in the story.
Oh, okay.
And the story definitely does incorporate other urban legends into its lore, such as Bloody Mary, who appears after you say her name several times into a mirror.
Stop looking at that mirror, Kevin.
If I say it in my mind, does it work? Also, the legend of the hooked hand man that terrorizes teenage lovers at Lover's Lane. Oh. Then there's the biblical story of Samson, which is also listed among those additional legends. In the book of Judges, the Philistines rule over Israel. Samson gets with a Philistine woman who becomes his wife, which crosses a racial line at this time in history. Mm. And he says he slays a lion that I guess has bees in its stomach that are making honey. Oh. Hence the Candyman reference here.
Oh, I see. Okay.
For me, that symbolizes more of like the bees, like the lynching bees that we were talking about. So I kind of like that you pointed that out, Kate, because, a lot of this is all not the whole story, I should say, but regarding like the fictional stories, right? It's symbolism. Mm-hmm. So I would relate it more to kind of what you said than I think this.
Well, I think especially because it was adapted from his story.
Exactly.
It can be left to interpretation.
Exactly. So regardless of the fictional origins of Candyman, the story and the titular character are all based on historical racial violence that people still face today. Mm. It's interesting to note, like I was mentioning earlier, that the actor that plays Candyman, Tony Todd, brought his own personal history and knowledge of racial injustice to his character. Mm-hmm. Director and writer Bernard Rose was super impressed by this, and they actually scrapped the original version of the script and gave Todd more creative control over the character and the origins.
That's awesome. Because I want to point out Bernard Rose and Clive Barker are both white dudes.
Yes.
And I'll get into something I was going to talk to you about earlier.
Yeah. Tony Todd and director Bernard Rose constructed the backstory to be directly linked to racism and urbanization, especially from Rose's decision to set it in Chicago. Mm. Candyman is very much part of the urban landscape, Todd said in a 2011 interview. I can't go to any hood in this country without total recognition from people who live there. In a 2015 interview with Rose, he mentioned that the Illinois Film Commission actually suggested using Cabrini Green because it was a scary place.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I wonder how he came up on Chicago.
Right. From an article about Candyman on allthat'sinteresting.com by Morgan Dunn, she writes, quote, "Perhaps the scariest thing about Candyman isn't his potential for violence and terror, but his ability to force audiences to think about the people like McCoy who were being demonized in the Cabrini Green homes." I would also say the larger, Chicago Housing Authority, and the very real terror Black Americans have faced throughout history. The true story of Candyman is about much more than a hook-wielding monster.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my God. Candyman, I'm so sorry, Kate.
You're fine.
You're going to have to edit and be like, this bitch.
You're fine.
Nun bitch. Real quick, when I was a little kid and I had to get my tonsils taken out in the 2nd grade, my parents took me down to Charleston, West Virginia to have the procedure done. And it was at a Catholic hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And I had just learned what this means at the time.
He's giving the finger.
Yeah. And my dad, after I had the surgery, I woke up and my dad and mom were like, "Oh my God, how are you feeling?" And then I just looked at them and I went like this, gave them the middle finger. And then they had nuns come through to like check on all the patients.
Yeah.
And so a nun walked in and each of them from either side grabbed my arm and held it down so I wouldn't give her the finger.
Such a little rebel.
Such a little shit. Candyman was reimagined in 2021 with a sequel directed by Nia DaCosta and written by Jordan Peele, Wynn Rosenfeld, and Nia DaCosta. It takes place in the present day after the Cabrini Green Towers had been torn down.
Mm-hmm.
Artist Anthony McCoy,
yes.
played by, you might have to help me here, Yahya Abdul Mateen II.
Sounded great to me.
And his partner, Brianna Cartwright, played by Tayona Paris, move into a loft in the now gentrified area where Cabrini Green once stood.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony learns the local legends of Candyman, and he uses this legend to inspire and inform his newest artistic works. However, he might be bringing Candyman back.
I know that's not the theme song to the movie.
I actually really liked this sequel. What did you think about it?
I liked it too. So what I was telling you before is that I, just to prepare so I could like have an image of things in my head for this episode,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make sure that I watched both of them. I saw the original when I was like 11. The newer one I just watched a few days ago. And as a kid, I did not compute all of the history and like the meanings of things.
Neither did I.
But watching the newer one, I will say it was incredibly depressing, and it does shine a light on all of those injustices and the racial inequality and just societal problems as a whole that we continue to deal with. And it was sad. It was a different kind of horror
feel,
movie,
isn't it? Yeah.
Well,
I liked that about it.
It's a different kind of horror movie because I remember that when I saw the first one as a kid, I was really scared because I was scared of everything.
It's face value.
But I will say, then I rewatched the original, and as I was watching it, I said to myself, I think this was written and directed by a white person.
Mm-hmm.
Because it definitely gives this white savior vibe.
I get that, yeah.
Particularly with Virginia Madsen's character. So then I looked it up and I was like, oh, okay, 2 white dudes. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Because Nia DaCosta, Jordan Peele, I mean, obviously they have a black crew. And
perspective.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was almost 2 different stories. I got what they were doing with the first one, but the second one really hits home about all of the history.
I think it hits a little harder.
Yeah.
And I think because I watched the first one again a couple years ago, and I hadn't seen it in the longest time, and
Mm-hmm.
it really got to me. Just with all of what we're talking about, I was sort of like understanding and interpreting things in a different way.
Right.
As regard, having lived here, understanding the history,
Mm-hmm.
Their relationship, him as a black man and a white woman, and her being like the savior, because that's what I was taking from it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But the second one to me really gets to the nitty gritty of it.
Yes.
And
agreed.
I love that.
Yeah.
And the movie looks at the tale and legend through urbanization and harm done to black communities as they were forced into segregated housing and then completely neglected, then kicked out because of gentrification.
Yep.
So Nia DaCosta said in an interview with Time magazine, quote, "The original film definitely fed into a fear of the black community and the black man in particular. I didn't want to do this approach of, oh God, this terrible place where terrible things are happening because these brutes are living here. This is a community that was chronically underserved for a very long time.
Yes.
And that is the story of Ruthie Mae McCoy, the Chicago Housing Projects, and the movie that brought the history to light through the horror genre, Candyman.
That was great. I'm glad that we did this episode because I don't think I'm the only person who didn't get the history from the original. Again, I saw it when I was a child, and I didn't see the new one when it first came out. Mm-hmm. So for anyone that hasn't seen the new one yet,
I'd say watch the first one.
If you can, watch the first one first.
Yeah.
Because I thought the new one was a remake.
No, it's a sequel.
Right. When it came out.
Because Vanessa Williams is in the first one and this one. And at that moment where she's like, don't say the name, give me chills. Mm-hmm.
Back when it came out, I assumed it was a remake. I don't know why I had that in my brain. So when I watched it, I was like, oh, wow, this really doesn't feel like the first one, even though it's been so long since I saw it. And then I watched the first one. I was like, oh.
It kind of exponentially builds upon the themes that the first one sort of lays out, but doesn't like directly hit on.
Yeah.
Which I think I'm glad that Tony Todd brought his experience to it, because I think that's what elevated it and made his performance so good. But I don't think it gets to the level that the second one does in regards to how we think about, racial inequality, especially in like urbanization and in Chicago and all of those things.
And again, I mean, it was two white dudes who wrote that, white director. And it makes me wonder, like, God, what was the story before Tony Todd brought his
I mean, you could probably read it. Like, it's a Clive Barker short story called The Forbidden.
Yeah, that was a great episode. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you for bringing it.
I enjoyed researching it.
It's interesting, yeah.
I shouldn't say I enjoyed researching it. I think researching it was eye-opening.
I'm glad to know the background of all of that. And I also think that that is what makes horror movies successful, is that when they are grounded in something very real and the true horror of what is going on with the movie. Are your nails okay?
They're fine. I'm sorry. I'm listening. It was kind of hurting my nail bed.
He's got some serious coffin-shaped black nails. And
one came off before I left.
He's devastated by it.
Anyway, no, go ahead.
But I think that's what makes those kind of movies successful is, I mean, it's really it's true horror that comes through. And then, but it's giving it a lens of something that is, as much as I hate to say this, a little bit more easy to digest for some people.
Sure.
In the realm of a horror movie. Yeah. I don't really know where I was going with that.
No, I love that you bring that up, Kate, and I'm glad you did, because I think for me, when people ask, why do you like horror so much? I don't know. But when I watch horror movies, especially older, as you know, in my 30s, it's easier for me to analyze the symbolism and what it is actually saying or trying to say. Like, that's why I like it so much, is because the lens is so interesting and spooky and scary, and it's trying to say this, but it also has something completely different underneath at the surface. Yeah. And so when I watch these movies, like when I was watching The Exorcist, to me that was like a commentary on faith and all of that. And so I think the horror genre does a really great job of bringing light to issues, but sometimes people don't go beyond the face value of the scares and the scariness of it. And I think that's what's so interesting, is because there is so much more behind that sort of facade of horror that people don't take seriously. You know, people don't like to be scared, but fear is such an important part of who we are as like a human race and species. We just don't want to deal with it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to like confront it. But that's, I feel like what horror is trying to do. Yeah,
is make
you aware.
And that's it, everybody. Have a wonderful Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
And it's great.
Happy Halloween.
That is a terrifying voice.
An old nun voice. I'm trying to...
I was like, where are you going with it?
Happy Halloween.
Okay.
I need to drink.
Yeah, we can get you a beer.
Thank you, Kate.
I have a beer going. And you can do all the things, the comments, the questions, the likes, the hates, which I hope you don't hate it.
No, rate, review, and subscribe.
Bump, bump, bump. Although I will say after we shouted that out
Did
last
someone
time.
leave bad reviews?
Well, they didn't write it because it was on Spotify and you can't leave a written review.
Oh.
But every time that we mentioned, hey, leave us a review, give us a rating.
Star.
Our rating goes down. So our rating went down.
You know what? Never mind. Don't do anything. Just stop listening and go.
Don't stop listening.
Well, if you don't like it. Well, no. If you don't like it, keep listening. Because maybe we'll say something to change your mind. Or not. Wait, we didn't do at Horrorwood Podcast.
We just did.
Did we?
You did. Good job.
So follow us on the socials at Horrorwood Podcast. Join our Patreon at patreon.com/horrorwoodpodcast.
Like Heather Shaw.
Heather Shaw. Happy Halloween.
Be a Heather Shaw.
Be a Heather Shaw. Don't be a 1-star subscriber. Or if you want to email us your stories, your horror stuff.
We want your true crime stories, like your own. Like if you experienced something.
Tell us about it.
If you committed a true crime, maybe don't tell us because we don't want to be.
And we won't read that.
Yeah, we don't want to be accomplices.
No.
But tell us your ghosty stories. Send them all in. People are sending them in. I'm loving it.
I'm loving it too.
I can't wait for the next episode that we do.
So that's our Gmail is horrorwoodpodcast@gmail.com if you want to write in.
Now we have all the things done and we can say
peace. Halloween.